Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is PhoenixGinny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Storytime Saturday number 22. Welcome to Let's Read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We're going to be reading chapters 7 and 8 today. It's a beautiful day outside. I hope it's beautiful where you are. Thank you for joining me. All the usual things. Feel free to make comments in the chat or in the chat down below if you're watching this and it's no longer live. This isn't the PhoenixGinny show. This is a collective thing. So feel free to make any sort of commentary that you would like while I'm reading. I certainly will be. So we can make a conversation. Also, feel free to click the thumbs up button, like the stream or the video. It really helps me out. Tells YouTube that you like the video, and they're more likely to share the video or the stream with other people so we can get more people watching this. And if you're not subscribed, what are you doing? So glad you're here. Please click the subscribe button if you like more content like this. And click the bell icon so you can be notified the next time I go live and the next time I upload, because occasionally I upload things. I will be live streaming again next week, probably Friday and Saturday. I'm not 100% sure on the time yet, but if you follow me on Twitter, link in the description, you'll know ahead of time. That's where I post my streaming schedule, because it's kind of different every week. But, yeah, I think that's it. I'll be streaming next Friday. We finished Lego Harry Potter last night, so I will be starting a new game. I'm going to be playing the Halo series. I have the Master Chief Collection, and I'm ready to get that started, so very exciting. And then, Saturday, we'll be here again, reading more Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, chapters 9 and 10. Yes, I can count. So, get comfortable, get cozy. I don't have a drink with me, I usually do, but I encourage you to have a drink, have some tea, water, juice, pumpkin juice, whatever you like. And I shall read to you. It's going to be a lovely time. Okay. Forgive me if I'm a little tired. I went to the gym today, and I haven't been in a week. And it kind of kicked my butt, so I'm a little tired, but we'll get through this together. All right. Let me make sure my sound is okay. Should be. Yeah. Okay. Chapter 7. The Boggart in the Wardrobe. College me crossed out Boggart in, and I put Lion the Witch and. Very funny. Malfoy didn't reappear in classes until late on Thursday morning, when the Slytherins and Gryffindors were halfway through double potions. Oh, that's right, he was injured by Buckbeak. He was injured. To be fair, there was blood on the ground, okay? He was actually injured, but it's totally his fault, so. Anyway, he swaggered, as he always does, into the dungeon, his right arm covered in bandages and bound up in a sling, acting in Harry's opinion as though he were the heroic survivor of some dreadful battle, right? So, I mean, if it wasn't a real injury, Madame Pomfrey would have noticed, and she wouldn't have bandaged him up like that if she didn't think it needed it. He's still probably milking it, though. At least the pain part. "How is it, Draco?" simpered Pansy Parkinson. "Does it hurt much?" "Yeah," said Malfoy, putting on a brave sort of grimace. But Harry saw him wink at Crabbe. "Ah! Blah, I want to puke! This is awful!" First of all, I have not very nice things to say about Pansy Parkinson. I have written fan fiction in the past concerning Pansy Parkinson, and I've called her not nice things. There's something very adult I could say about what she's doing to Malfoy. I won't say it. But, is there a more polite way of saying it? I don't know. There is, but it still doesn't quite capture what she's doing to him. It's gross. It's repulsive. Blah. I hate it. Anyway. But Harry saw him wink at Crabbe and Goyle when Pansy had looked away. Settle down, said Professor Snape idly. Harry and Ron scowled at each other. Snape wouldn't have said settle down if they'd walked in late. He'd have given them detention. That's true. Snape definitely plays favorites. But Malfoy had always been able to get away with anything in Snape's classes. Snape was head of Slytherin House and generally favored his own students above all others. They were making a new potion today, a shrinking solution. Malfoy set up his cauldron right next to Harry and Ron so that they were preparing their ingredients on the same table. Sir, Malfoy called. Oh, I hate this too! Oh my gosh, I want to strangle him! It's gonna get worse too. I mean, this is giving me painful flashbacks of, Goblet of Fire. How bad Snape's classes are going to be in Goblet of Fire. Oh man, just wait for that. When I first ever read Goblet of Fire, after the Rita Skeeter publishes her articles about Harry and Hermione, it's just horrible. Snape's class ends up being terrible. I was fuming mad when I was reading it for the first time. I put the book down. I was really upset. But I was a teenager / kid at the time. How old was I when I read Goblet of Fire? I had to have been in middle school. It came out when I was in elementary school, but I came a little late to the party. So I had to have been about middle school. And so, the things that happen to Harry are, unthinkable. As an adult, it's just it's okay. It's not fun, but you'll get over it. It's fine. Because when you're an adult, you worry about real things. But when as a kid, I was mortified. I couldn't believe it. And so I'm just, remembering reading this. And I'm just remembering how awful Snape's classes are going to get. We'll get there. It's actually kind of exciting. Sir, Malfoy called. Sir, I'll need help cutting up these daisy roots because of my arm. Weasley can cut up Malfoy's roots for him, said Snape without looking up. Ron went brick red. There's nothing wrong with your arm, he hissed at Malfoy. I'll break your other arm. That's what I would have said. I'll give you something real to cry about. Malfoy smirked across the table. Weasley, you heard Professor Snape. Cut up these roots. Ron seized his knife, pulled Malfoy's roots toward him, and began to chop them roughly so that they were all different sizes. Professor, drawled Malfoy. Weasley's mutilating my roots, sir. Snape approached their table, stared down his hooked nose at the roots, and gave Ron an unpleasant smile from beneath his long, greasy... Oh! I'm so angry! I can't. I can't even right now. Beneath his long, greasy black hair. Change roots with Malfoy, Weasley. But, sir! Ron had spent the last quarter of an hour carefully shredding his own roots into exactly equal pieces. Mm-hmm. Well, you could argue... I think this is terrible, but you could argue that if Ron had been a good person, or if he had been a Christian, he would have served Malfoy and actually done a good job with the roots. But I totally get why he didn't, and I probably wouldn't have acted any better. Now, said Snape in his most dangerous voice. So I probably didn't do it justice. I'm not great with Snape's voice. Ron shoved his own beautifully cut roots across the table at Malfoy, then took up the knife again. And, sir, I'll need this shrivel fig skinned, said Malfoy, his voice full of malicious laughter. Potter, you can skin Malfoy's shrivel fig, said Snape, giving Harry the look of loathing he always reserved just for him. Harry took Malfoy's shrivel fig as Ron began trying to repair the damage to the roots he now had to use. Harry skinned the shrivel fig as fast as he could and flung it back across the table at Malfoy without speaking. Malfoy was smirking more broadly than ever. Seen your pal Hagrid lately? He asked them quietly. None of your business, said Ron jerkily, without looking up. I'm afraid he won't be a teacher much longer, said Malfoy in a tone of mock sorrow. Father's not very happy about my injury. Keep talking, Malfoy, and I'll give you a real injury, snarled Ron, which is exactly what I said. He complained to the school governors and to the Minister of Magic. Father's got a lot of influence, you know. And a lasting injury like this, he gave a huge fake sigh. Who knows if my arm will ever be the same again? So that's why you're putting it on, said Harry, accidentally beheading a dead caterpillar because his hand was shaking in anger. To try to get Hagrid fired. You didn't figure that out already? I thought that was obvious. Well, said Malfoy, lowering his voice to a whisper, partly, Potter. But there are other benefits, too. Weasley, slice my caterpillars for me. A few cauldrons away, Neville was in trouble. Neville regularly went to pieces in potions lessons. It was his worst subject. And his great fear of Professor Snape made things 10 times worse. That is important. He has a fear of Professor Snape because it's going to be relevant later in the chapter. And I didn't mark that. I should. And his great fear of Professor Snape made things 10 times worse. Put a star for importance. His potion, which was supposed to be a bright acid green, had turned orange, Longbottom, said Snape, ladling some up and allowing it to splash back into the cauldron so that everyone could see. Orange. Tell me, boy, does anything penetrate that thick skull of yours? Didn't you hear me say quite clearly that only one rat spleen was needed? Didn't I state plainly that a dash of leech juice would suffice? What do I have to do to make you understand, Longbottom? Neville was pink and trembling. He looked as though he was on the verge of tears. Please, sir, said Hermione. Please, I could help Neville put it right. I don't remember asking you to show off, Miss Granger, said Snape coldly, and Hermione went as pink as Neville. Longbottom, at the end of this lesson, we will feed a few drops of this potion to your toad and see what happens. Perhaps that will encourage you to do it properly. That? Okay, that's animal cruelty, number 1, but number 2, that's just plain cruel. That is terrible. That is awful. Why does Dumbledore let this man teach? I know why he's at Hogwarts. I get it. It's a very noble thing that he's here and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. He's a terrible human being. And also, I would like to think that I would I'd like to think that I would stand up for Neville or anyone that got bullied in school. Like I've never encountered anything like this before in school. I hope that this doesn't happen. I hope there are no teachers like this. I'm realistic. There probably is. And I can't ever remember encountering a teacher that was anything like this. But I would never let a teacher get away with something like this. Ever, ever, ever. At least I hope. Snape moved away, leaving Neville breathless with fear. Help me, he moaned to Hermione. Hey, Harry, said Seamus Finnegan, leaning over to borrow Harry's brass scales. Have you heard? Daily Prophet this morning. They reckon Sirius Black's been sighted. Where? Said Harry and Ron quickly. On the other side of the table, Malfoy looked up, listening closely. Not too far from here, said Seamus, who looked excited. It was a Muggle who saw him. Of course, she didn't really understand. The Muggles think he's just an ordinary criminal, don't they? So she phoned the telephone hotline. By the time the Ministry of Magic got there, he was gone. Not too far from here, Ron repeated, looking significantly at Harry. He turned around and saw Malfoy watching closely. Oh, I actually really like this part. This is actually kind of a cool thing that Malfoy does. Not that anything Malfoy does really is cool. But I just like this character arc moment. I don't know. Like, Malfoy knows more than Harry knows. And he just kind of hints at what he knows. I don't know. You'll see. What, Malfoy? Need something else skinned? Yeah, like your face. But Malfoy's eyes were shining malevolently, and they were fixed on Harry. He leaned across the table. Thinking of trying to catch Black single-handed, Potter? Yeah, that's right, said Harry, offhandedly. Malfoy's thin mouth was curving in a mean smile. Of course, if it was me, he said quietly, I'd have done something before now. I wouldn't be staying in school like a good boy. I'd be out there looking for him. No, you wouldn't. You're not that cool, Malfoy. What are you talking about, Malfoy? Said Ron roughly. Don't you know, Potter? Breathed Malfoy, his pale eyes narrowed. Know what? Malfoy let out a low, sneering laugh. Maybe you'd rather not risk your neck, he said. Want to leave it to the Dementors, do you? But if it was me, I'd want revenge. I'd hunt him down myself. What are you talking about? Said Harry angrily, but at the moment Snape called, You should have finished adding your ingredients by now. This potion needs to stew before it can be drunk. So clear away while it simmers, and then we'll test Longbottoms. Crabbe and Goyle laughed openly, watching Neville sweat as he stirred his potion feverishly. Hermione was muttering instructions to him out of the corner of her mouth so that Snape wouldn't see. Harry and Ron packed away their unused ingredients and went to wash their hands and ladles in the stone basin in the corner. What did Malfoy mean? Harry muttered to Ron as he stuck his hand under the icy jet that poured from the gargoyle's mouth. What a cool thing. That's way cool. I like that. Why would I want revenge on Black? He hasn't done anything to me. Yet. He's making it up, said Ron savagely. He's trying to make you do something stupid. The end of the lesson in sight, Snape strode over to Neville, who was cowering by his cauldron. Everyone gather around, said Snape, his black eyes glittering, and watch what happens to Longbottom's toad. If he had managed to produce a shrinking solution, it will shrink to a tadpole. If, as I don't doubt, he has done it wrong, his toad is likely to be poisoned. The Gryffindors watched fearfully. The Slytherins looked excited. Snape picked up Trevor the toad in his left hand and dipped a small spoon into Neville's potion, which was now green. He trickled a few drops down Trevor's throat. There was a moment of hushed silence, in which Trevor gulped. Then there was a small pop, and Trevor the tadpole was wiggling in Snape's palm. The Gryffindors burst into applause. Snape, looking sour, pulled a small bottle from the pocket of his robe, poured a few drops on top of Trevor, and he reappeared suddenly, fully grown. I guess you could argue that Snape might have fixed Trevor, but I wouldn't count on it. 5 points from Gryffindor, said Snape, which wiped the smiles from every face. I told you not to help him, Miss Granger. Class dismissed. I have not nice things to say to Snape right now. Very not nice things. Harry, Ron, and Hermione climbed the steps to the entrance hall. Harry was still thinking about what Malfoy had said, while Ron was seething about Snape. 5 points from Gryffindor because the potion was all right. Why didn't you lie, Hermione? You should have said Neville did it all by himself. Hermione didn't answer. Ron looked around. Where'd she go? Where is she? Harry turned too. They were at the top of the steps now, watching the rest of the class pass them, heading for the great hall and lunch. She was right behind us, said Ron, frowning. Malfoy passed them, walking between Crabbe and Goyle. He smirked at Harry and disappeared. There she is, said Harry. Hermione was panting slightly, hurrying up the stairs. One hand clutched her bag. The other seemed to be tucking something down in front of her robes. The time turner. How did you do that? Said Ron. What? Said Hermione, joining them. 1 minute you were right behind us, and the next moment you were back at the bottom of the stairs again. What? Hermione said, looking slightly confused. Oh, I had to go back for something. Oh, no. A seam had split on Hermione's bag. Harry wasn't surprised. He could see that it was crammed with at least a dozen large and heavy books. Why are you carrying all these around with you? Ron asked her. You know how many subjects I'm taking, said Hermione breathlessly. Couldn't hold these for me, could you? But Ron was turning over the books she had handed him. Looking at the covers. You haven't got any of these subjects today. It's only Defense Against the Dark Arts this afternoon. Well, for me personally, I would have, I sometimes brought stuff with me too, because sometimes I did homework in the middle of classes. In college, at least. I never did this in high school. Actually, it was worse in high school. Sometimes I wrote fan fiction while I was in class in high school. Oh man. Actually, I did that during college too, now that I think about it. If I just wasn't happy to be there, and it was a miracle that I was even there sometimes, I wrote fan fiction in middle class. But sometimes I would take books or stuff for other classes in case I had some downtime. I would start doing homework for other classes and whatever. So I don't think it's that unusual because she has so much homework to do. She probably just takes all of it everywhere. So any moment of downtime she uses it to do other homework, probably. That would make sense. And she probably should have said that. "Oh, yes," said Hermione vaguely, but she packed all the books back into her bag just the same. "I hope there's something good for lunch. I'm starving," she added, and she marched off toward the Great Hall. "Do you get the feeling Hermione's not telling us something?" Ron asked Harry. "Actually, yeah, there's something big she's not telling you. She's not allowed to." I wanted to talk about Malfoy. So Malfoy knows that Sirius Black was actually... Sirius Black is the reason... Well, we all know the truth, yes. But from the information that they have right now, they believe that Sirius Black is the reason that James and Lily are dead. He supposedly told Voldemort their location and whatever. And I don't know how Malfoy knows this, but I mean, I guess it's not that hard to figure out. But that's what Malfoy was hinting at. And I don't know. I don't know why I like that so much. Why I like Malfoy has that moment where he's just like, if it was me, I'd go after him myself. I don't know. Like, that's the Malfoy I want him to be. Like, I mean, I do, in a sense, I do want him to be a good guy. I do want him to make good choices. But I do like a good bad boy character. The problem with Malfoy is he's too much of a wimp, honestly. In the fan fiction world, we have what's called canon and fanon. Canon means this is how the story goes in the book. This is how the author intended it. But we also have what's called fanon, which is something that the fans took and made it into their own, which is things like fan fiction. Some characters have a canon way of acting, and they have a fanon way of acting. So, canon Malfoy is kind of wimpy, snivelly, obnoxious, pretends to be this big bad boy on campus, but he really isn't. He's just annoying. He pretends to be, really smart and really clever in this. I don't know. He pretends to be cool, but he's really not. He's actually kind of lame, kind of wimpy. Not anything to be interested in. I think that I'm not the only one that feels this way. A lot of people like Draco, and they don't see him that way. They made him into something... Over time, fans have made Draco into something different. They've made him into Fanon Draco, which is more of a badass kind of guy. Where he is a bad guy, but he's more cool about it, he's more suave, and he doesn't care what people think, and he's cooler. He's cooler. He's more of a bad boy. Like a cooler kind of bad boy, rather than just a weak, little annoying, pathetic one. And so, like, when you read fan fiction, that's the way you'll find Draco most of the time, especially written by Draco fans and people who like to pair him with various characters. You'll see him. And I am one of those people. I prefer Fanon Draco over Canon Draco. When I write fan fiction, I write him the way that fans write him, not the way he's written in the books. I also tend to give him a character arc, and I tend to somehow make him a good guy in the end. Although he's never completely a good guy. He's more like an anti-hero when I write him. But I just feel like that scene leans him more in the Fanon category. Like, he's not... Like, I doubt that he would actually, if he actually had an enemy like Sirius Black, he would actually leave school to go find him and kill him himself. I doubt that he would actually do that. But the fact that he's even saying that to Harry, and he says it in such a way that it's like, ooh, well, this is the Malfoy I like to see. I don't know. It's more attractive. I don't know. And it's more, I don't know. It's more Fan and Draco than Canon Draco, I feel like. He needs to be like that more often, I think, to make him more interesting. Alright. Professor Lupin wasn't there. Oh, I also want to talk about this. It also really makes me think of that song. I forget who wrote that song. And I wish I could play it, but it's probably copywritten. Well, I mean, I guess I could play it anyway, but I'm not going to. I forget what it's called. The song is called Sirius Black. And if you don't know it, yes, that's the character. I want the song. Oh, I used to have it on my iPod. The song, Sirius Black. And the song was made by, Tony Goldmark. And he did a rap parodying the song. What is that song called? I'm more familiar with the parody than the actual song. What's the parody song? It was... what's it called? Well, I'm going to have to look that up too. Although these videos look interesting. I gotta stop. I'm going to go down this rabbit hole. But what I used to do in high school was I would spend hours just going through YouTube and looking at these fan-made music videos. And I'm seeing a couple here that look really interesting. Oh, man, that'd be a good one. That's a good song for him. But there's a... Okay, what... Okay, I gotta find the song that this song parodies. Is that what it's called? No, that's not what I'm thinking of. I don't even know who sings it, who raps it. I don't know. Okay, let me try. Is that the name of the song? That is the name of the song. Okay, it's quite an adult song. It's the song Baby Got Back. He takes that song and makes a parody of it, and it's about Sirius Black, and the song is called Sirius Black. It's a rap, and it's really well done. It kind of tells you the story of Prisoner of Azkaban. Oh, it's so good! And they even have, I loved it the most because it actually has a clip of Daniel Radcliffe in the song at the very end. If you've never heard this song, I recommend you. It's such a good song. It's so good. I know it completely by heart, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to sing it. I know it completely word for word by heart. But it even has a moment in there where Malfoy joins the rap. So good. And he reiterates what he said here in that passage. He says, Potter, if it were me, I'd want revenge, you see. And I'd curse his ass and send it back into the shrieking shack. Sirius Black. So good. You should look it up. If you've never heard it, look it up. It's so good. And anyway, that's what I always think of when I read that part. Okay. Professor Lupin wasn't there when they arrived at his first Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson. They all sat down, took out their books, quills, and parchment, and were talking when he finally entered the room. Lupin smiled vaguely and placed his tatty old briefcase on the teacher's desk. He was as shabby as ever, but looked healthier than he had on the train, as though he had had a few square meals. Probably. And I'm not homeless anymore. You don't need to be afraid of me. Sorry, I quoted that already. A Harry Potter sequel. That's where that's from. Good afternoon, he said. Would you please put all your books back in your bags? Today's will be a practical lesson. You'll need only your wands. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's another one. Yes. Yes, that is another one. It is a direct parallel to... Oh, no, that's not right. You can't see it. Oh, no. I could probably do this. Yeah! See? My neat pyramid that I made. I always refer to this pyramid if you're new. The books have a lot of similarities with each other based on their color. And where they are across the pyramid. So, Sorcerer's Stone and Goblet of Fire and Deathly Hallows have a lot in common. Chamber of Secrets and Half-Blood Prince have a lot in common. And Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix have a lot in common. Look. The very first... So, we're going to see here a parallel between Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix. So... very first lesson with Professor Lupin. And he says, put away your books. Take out your wands. It's going to be a practical lesson. But what is the very first lesson with Professor Umbridge and Order of the Phoenix like? Put away your wands. Take out your books. We're not doing anything practical ever. That is such a perfect parallel that I hadn't even noticed until now. I'm going to put the opposite of Umbridge in OOTP. Haha. A few curious looks were exchanged as the class put away their books. They'd never had a practical defense against the dark arts before, unless you counted the memorable class last year when their old teacher had brought a cage full of pixies to class and set them loose. Right then, said Professor Lupin when everyone was ready. If you'd follow me. Puzzled but interested, the class got to its feet and followed Professor Lupin out of the classroom. He led them along the deserted corridor and around a corner, where the first thing they saw was Peeves the Poltergeist, who was floating upside down in midair and stuffing the nearest keyhole with chewing gum. Peeves didn't look up until Professor Lupin was 2 feet away. Then he wiggled his curly-toed feet and broke into song. Loony loopy Lupin, Peeves sang. Loony loopy Lupin, loony loopy Lupin. Rude and unimaginable as he almost always was, Peeves usually showed some respect toward the teachers. Everyone looked quickly at Professor Lupin to see how he would take this. To their surprise, he was still smiling. I'd take that gum out of the keyhole if I were you, Peeves, he said pleasantly. Mr. Filch won't be able to get to his brooms. The reason why Peeves treats him differently is because Peeves knew him as a kid, because... I guess you could say that about most of the teachers. Snape was there too, but honestly, I can't imagine any being of any kind crossing Snape, to be honest. Well, he was, I imagine all the teachers went to Hogwarts at one point. So why would Peeves treat Lupin differently? That is an interesting question. Because I just thought, well, because he used to be a student there, but it's like, so have all the other teachers, I'm sure. Hogwarts has been around for centuries. I don't know. That's a really good question. Why does Peeves treat him differently? Filch was the Hogwarts caretaker, a bad-tempered, failed wizard. I wouldn't say that. That's not very nice. He's a squid, not a failed wizard. Those are two very different things. Who waged a constant war against the students and, indeed, Peeves. However, Peeves paid no attention to Professor Lupin's words, except to blow a loud, wet raspberry. Professor Lupin gave a small sigh and took out his wand. This is a useful little spell, he told the class over his shoulder. Please watch closely. He raised the wand to shoulder height and said, Wadawasi? What kind of a word is that? That doesn't even sound like Latin. Wadawasi. And pointed it at Peeves. With the force of a bullet, the wad of chewing gum shot out of the keyhole and straight down Peeves' left nostril. Would it be straight up his nostril? Unless he's upside down. That's a really good question. Wadawasi. He whirled upright. Okay, so he is upside down. Okay. And zoomed away, cursing. Cool, sir, said Dean Thomas in amazement. Thank you, Dean, said Professor Lupin, putting his wand away again. Shall we proceed? Lupin is definitely the coolest teacher they've ever had. They set off again, the class looking at shabby Professor Lupin with increased respect. Mad respect. He led them down a second corridor and stopped right outside the staff room door. Inside, please, said Professor Lupin, opening it and standing back. The staff room, a long paneled room full of old mismatched chairs, was empty except for one teacher. Why? Professor Snape was sitting in a low armchair, and he looked around as the class filed in. His eyes were glittering, and there was a nasty sneer playing around his mouth. As Professor Lupin came in and made to close the door behind him, Snape said, Leave it open, Lupin. I'd rather not witness this. Oh, I don't know. You might want to stick around. He got to his feet and strode past the class, his black robes billowing behind him. At the doorway he turned on his heel and said, Possibly no one's warned you, Lupin, but this class contains Neville Longbottom. I would advise you not to entrust him with anything difficult. Not unless Miss Granger is hissing instructions in his ear. Why does Snape feel the need to bully Neville so much? I don't understand. There's so many people. Well, I don't know if there's many. I hope there isn't many. There's people that believe that Snape should have ended up with Lily. I'm telling you, Lily would have never put up with this. This is disgusting behavior. No. Inappropriate. Absolutely unacceptable. I just can't even. That's not professional at all. That's terrible. But it's okay. Lupin's going to turn it around. Neville went scarlet. Harry glared at Snape. It was bad enough that he bullied Neville in his own classes, let alone doing it in front of other teachers. Exactly. It's extremely unprofessional. Professor Lupin had raised his eyebrows. I was hoping that Neville would assist me with the first stage of the operation, he said, and I'm sure he'd perform it admirably. That's good teaching at work. Neville's face went, if possible, even redder. Snape's lip curled, but he left, shutting the door with a snap. Oh, man, I wish he'd stayed. Now then, said Professor Lupin, beckoning the class toward the end of the room, where there was nothing but an old wardrobe where the teachers kept their spare robes. As Professor Lupin went to stand next to it, the wardrobe gave a sudden wobble, banging off the wall. Nothing to worry about, said Professor Lupin calmly, because a few people had jumped backward in alarm. There's a Boggart in there. Where do Boggarts come from? Are they in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them? Are they considered a beast? I don't know. I wonder if I could find it. Interesting. Why is Harry's Boggart a Dementor? Good question. Oh, it's in Celtic mythology. It's a household spirit, sometimes mischievous, sometimes helpful. Interesting. Well, it's got that scene right there. Oh, that's interesting. 50 characters Boggarts, Harry Potter theory. It's a YouTube video. That would be interesting to know what other people's Boggarts would be. Shape-shifting creature that will assume the form of whatever frightens the person who encounters it. Yes, I know that. Do we know anything more about them? Uh-huh. Okay, interesting. Like a poltergeist, a Boggart is not and never has been truly alive. It is one of the strange non-beings that populate the magical world, for which there is no equivalent in the Muggle realm. Boggarts can be made to disappear, but more Boggarts will inevitably arise to take their place. Like poltergeists and the more sinister Dementors, they seem to be generated and sustained by human emotions. So that's where they come from. They come from fear. That's how they grow. That's where they come from. They come from fear. Interesting. Okay. Okay. But the answer, fear. It's a non-being, so it's not really a creature, so you won't find it in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Interesting. It's more of a phenomenon. Most people seem to feel that this was something to worry about. Neville gave Professor Lupin a look of pure terror, and Seamus Finnegan eyed the now rattling doorknob apprehensively. Boggarts like dark, enclosed spaces, said Professor Lupin. Wardrobes, the gap beneath beds, the cupboards under sinks. I've even met one that had lodged itself in a grandfather clock. This one moved in yesterday afternoon, and I asked the headmaster if the staff would leave it to give my third year some practice. So the first question we must ask ourselves is, what is a Boggart? Hermione put up her hand. It's a shapeshifter, she said. It can take the shape of whatever it thinks will frighten us most. Couldn't have put it better myself, said Professor Lupin, and Hermione glowed. So the Boggart sitting in the darkness within has not yet assumed a form. He does not yet know what will frighten the person on the other side of the door. Nobody knows what a Boggart looks like when he is alone, but when I let him out, he will immediately become whatever each of us most fears. This means, said Professor Lupin, choosing to ignore Neville's small putter of terror, that we have a huge advantage over the Boggart before we begin. Have you spotted it, Harry? Harry is being addressed, trying to answer a question with Hermione next to him, bobbing up and down on the balls of her feet, which her hand in the air was very off-putting, but Harry had a go. Because there are so many of us, it won't know what shape it should be. Precisely, said Professor Lupin, and Hermione put her hand down, looking a little disappointed. It's always best to have company when you're dealing with a Boggart. He becomes confused. Which should he become, a headless corpse or a flesh-eating slug? I once had a Boggart make that very mistake. Tried to frighten 2 people at once and turned himself into a half a slug. Not remotely frightening. I don't know. But that's so good. And that is really good advice for real life. Because Boggarts are real, aren't they? We might not actually encounter such a creature, but we have fears all the time. In Christianity there's a phrase from a Christian song we like to use, and the phrase is, "Fear is just a liar running out of breath." which is essentially fear oftentimes is just a way of stopping us from reaching our true potential, from doing what we need to do. Now, there's some fears that are legitimate, like I don't know. How often do we encounter actual fear in our day-to-day lives? I mean, if you're in war, for instance, it's a legitimate fear that you're going to be killed, right? It's called self-preservation. There's instances where you do need to avoid fear, avoid places and things that make you afraid to stay alive. But when it comes to things like, I'm afraid of what people will think of me if I say this, if I stand up and do the right thing. I have a fear of pursuing my dream job because what if I fail, and things like that. One of the best ways to deal with fear is through community. It's sharing your fear, talking it out with other people. Because, as Luna Lovegood's going to say later, in Order of the Phoenix, to some degree, if it's just you alone, you're not as much of a threat. And so, whatever you believe in as far as evil goes, whether it's just a concept or an actual being, the best way to fight it is with your friends, in company with other people. Because you're stronger together. We are stronger together. And that is what you're supposed to take away from this. Wonder what I should write there. I'll put community fights fear. Okay. The charm that repels a Boggart is simple, yet it requires force of mind. You see, the thing that really finishes a Boggart is laughter. That's also good too. That's also great advice. The things you learn in Harry Potter are the best magic in the world are music, sweets, and laughter. Isn't that great? It's awesome. The most magical things in the world are muggle things, are things that muggles can access every single day. I gotta write that down. I might even post that on Twitter for people who aren't watching this. The most magical things in life. Muggles can access. Music. That's from the first one. Dumbledore says, music, more magical than anything we do here. Music, sweets, and laughter. J.K. Rowling is a genius in that regard. That is beautiful. I love that. I missed a word. The most magical... Okay, I gotta rewrite this. The most magical things in life muggles can access. Music, sweets, and laughter. What you need to do is force it to assume a shape that you find amusing. We'll practice the charm without wands first. After me, please. Ridiculous. Ridiculous, said the class together. Good, said Professor Lupin. Very good. But that was the easy part, I'm afraid. You see, the word alone is not enough, and this is where you come in, Neville. I like Draco, what he says in the movie. This class is ridiculous. The wardrobe shook again, though not as much as Neville, who walked forward as though he was heading for the gallows. Right, Neville, said Professor Lupin. First things first, what would you say is the thing that frightened you most in the world? Lupin's lips moved, but no noise came out. Didn't catch that, Neville, sorry, said Professor Lupin cheerfully. Neville looked around rather wildly, as though begging someone to help him, then said in barely more than a whisper, "Professor Snape." Nearly everyone laughed. Even Neville grinned apologetically. Professor Lupin, however, looked thoughtful. "Professor Snape. Neville, I believe you live with your grandmother." Yes," said Neville nervously, "but I don't want the Boggart to turn into her, either." No, you misunderstood me. You misunderstand me," said Professor Lupin, now smiling. "I wonder, could you tell us what sort of clothes your grandmother usually wears?" Neville looked startled, but said, "Well, always the same hat, a tall one with a stuffed vulture on top, and a long dress, green normally, and sometimes a fox fur scarf." Yeah, that's different from the movie because Lupin tells him not to say. But it's important that Neville does say it because this is a book, not a movie, and we can't see it, so we need to hear it. We need to read what she looks like. "And a handbag," prompted Professor Lupin. How does he know his grandmother? I don't know. I'm sure people in the Wizarding World run into each other. I'm sure they're all kind of familiar with each other. "A big red one," said Neville. "Right then," said Professor Lupin. "Can you picture those clothes very clearly, Neville? Can you see them in your mind's eye?" "Yes," said Neville uncertainly, plainly wondering what was coming next. "When the Boggart bursts out of this wardrobe, Neville, and sees you, it will assume the form of Professor Snape," said Lupin, "and she will raise your wand, thus, and cry, 'Ridiculous!' and concentrate hard on your grandmother's clothes. If all goes well, Professor Boggart Snape will be forced into that vulture-topped hat and that green dress with that big red handbag." No. There was a great shout of laughter. The wardrobe wobbled more violently. So he doesn't like laughter. "If Neville is successful, the Boggart is likely to shift his attention to each of us in turn," said Professor Lupin. "I would like all of you to take a moment now to think of the thing that scares you most, and imagine how you might force it to look comical." The room went quiet. Harry thought. What scared him most in the world? His first thought was Lord Voldemort, a Voldemort returning to full strength. But before he had ever even started to plan a possible counterattack on a Boggart Voldemort, a horrible image came floating to the surface of his mind. A rotting, glistening hand, slithering back beneath a black cloak, a long, rattling breath from an unseen mouth, then a cold so penetrating it felt like drowning. See, Harry never really felt helpless with Voldemort. I mean, not yet. Not at this point. Not really. But he was rendered completely helpless before Dementor. Maybe it's not necessarily fear itself that he fears. Maybe it's helplessness. Harry shivered, then looked around, hoping no one had noticed. Many people had their eyes shut tight. Ron was muttering to himself, "Take its legs off." Harry was sure he knew what that was about. Ron's greatest fear was spiders. "Everyone ready?" said Professor Lupin. Harry felt a lurch of fear. He wasn't ready. How could you make a Dementor less frightening? But he didn't want to ask for more time. Everyone else was nodding and rolling up their sleeves. "Never going to back away," said Professor Lupin. "Let you have a clear field, all right? I'll call the next person forward. Everyone back now, so Neville can get a clear shot." They all retreated, backed against the walls, leaving Neville alone outside. Beside the wardrobe. I can't read. He looked pale and frightened, but he had pushed up the sleeves of his robes and was holding his wand ready. "On the count of 3, Neville," said Professor Lupin, who was pointing his own wand at the handle of the wardrobe. 1, 2, 3, now. A jet of sparks shot from the end of Professor Lupin's wand and hit the doorknob. The wardrobe burst open. Hook-nosed and menacing, Professor Snape stepped out, his eyes flashing at Neville. Neville backed away, his wand up, mouthing wordlessly. Snape was bearing down upon him, reaching inside his robes. "Ridiculous!" squeaked Neville. There was a noise like a whip crack. Snape stumbled. He was wearing a long, lace-trimmed dress and a towering hat topped with a moth-eaten vulture, and he was swinging a huge crimson handbag. There was a roar of laughter. The Boggart paused, confused, and Professor Lupin shouted, "Parvati, forward!" Parvati walked forward, her face set. Snape rounded on her. There was another crack, and where he had stood was a blood-stained, bandaged mummy. Its sightless face was turned to Parvati, and it began to walk toward her very slowly, dragging its feet, its stiff arms rising. "Ridiculous!" cried Parvati. A bandage unraveled at the mummy's feet. It became entangled, fell face forward, and its head rolled off. "Seamus!" roared Professor Lupin. Seamus darted past Parvati. It's a really hard name to pronounce. And I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it right. Crack. Where the mummy had been was a woman with floor-length black hair and a skeletal green-tinged face. A banshee. She opened her mouth wide, and an unearthly sound filled the room, a long, wailing shriek that made the hair on Harry's head stand on end. "Ridiculous!" shouted Seamus. The banshee made a rasping noise and clutched her throat. Her voice was gone. Crack. The banshee turned into a rat, which chased its tail in a circle. Then crack became a rattlesnake, which slithered and writhed before crack, becoming a single bloody eyeball. "It's confused," shouted Lupin. "We're getting there. Dean!" Dean hurried forward. Crack. The eyeball became a severed hand, which flipped over and began to creep along the floor like a crab. "Ridiculous," shouted Dean. There was a snap, and the hand was trapped in a mousetrap. "Excellent! Ron, you next." Ron leapt forward. Crack. Quite a few people screamed. A giant spider, 6 feet tall and covered in hair, was advancing on Ron, clicking its pincers menacingly. For a moment Harry thought Ron had frozen. Then, "Ridiculous!" bellowed Ron, and the spider's legs vanished. It rolled over and over. Lavender Brown squealed and ran out of its way, and it came to a halt at Harry's feet. He raised his wand, ready, but... "Here!" shouted Professor Lupin suddenly, hurrying forward. Crack! The legless spider had vanished. For a second, everyone looked wildly around to see where it was. Then they saw a silvery white orb hanging in the air in front of Lupin, who said, "Ridiculous!" almost lazily. Crack! "Forward, Neville, and finish him off," said Lupin as the Boggart landed on the floor as a cockroach. Crack! Snape was back. This time Neville charged forward looking determined. "Ridiculous!" he shouted, and they had a split-second's view of Snape in his lacy dress before Neville let out a great "Ha!" of laughter, and the Boggart exploded, burst into 1,000 tiny wisps of smoke, and was gone. Freaking awesome. Okay. I wanted to mention... Oh, that's different than the movie. In the movie, it was roller skates. But I think one of those instances where I think the movie did it better. I think the roller skates are a little better than just taking his legs off. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm hearing the song in my head too while I'm reading this. He had some funky jazz tunes going on in the movie, and I can hear that song in my head. Also, I was going to mention... Oh, I love that it's Neville who finishes it off. Neville was encouraged by Lupin. Lupin gave him the courage and the confidence to finish it off, to prove that he wasn't what Snape said. We all need teachers like that. There should be more teachers like that. Sorry. It makes me a little teary-eyed. Because I think it's beautiful. "Excellent!" cried Professor Lupin as the class broke into applause. "Excellent, Neville. Well done, everyone. Let me see. 5 points to Gryffindor for every person to tackle the Boggart. 10 for Neville because he did it twice. Yay. And 5 each to Hermione and Harry." "But I didn't do anything," said Harry. "You and Hermione answered my questions correctly at the start of the class, Harry," Lupin said lightly. "Yeah." Very well, everyone. An excellent lesson. Homework, kindly read the chapter on Boggart and summarize it for me. To be handed in on Monday. That'll be all. Talking excitedly, the class left the staff room. Harry, however, wasn't feeling cheerful. Professor Lupin had deliberately stopped him from tackling the Boggart. Why? Was it because he'd seen Harry collapse on the train and thought he wasn't up to much? Had he thought Harry would pass out again? But no one else seemed to have noticed anything. "Did you see me take that Banshee?" shouted Seamus. "And the hand," said Dean, waving his own around. "And Snape in that hat!" "And my mummy. I wonder why Professor Lupin's frightened of crystal balls," said Lavender thoughtfully. "Well, that was the best defense against the dark arts lesson we've ever had, wasn't it?" said Ron excitedly as they made their way back to the classroom to get their bags. "He seems like a very good teacher," said Hermione approvingly, "but I wish I could have had a turn at the Boggart." "What would it have been for you?" said Ron, sniggering. "A piece of homework that only got 9 out of 10? "Actually, very close." Alright, but that's the end of the chapter. So next we'll read chapter 8, but after a quick 15-minute break. Thank you so much for joining me thus far. This is what I usually do. I took a customary 15-minute break. While we're on that break, feel free to get a snack, get a drink, use the restroom, stand up, stretch. That's all the things that I typically do, pretty much. If you missed my spiel at the beginning, please feel free to leave comments in the chat or in the comment section about what we're reading. Join the conversation. Also, please click the like button if you're enjoying it. Helps YouTube that you like it. More likely to share it with others. So excited to share with other people. If you're not subscribed, I'd love to have you on the channel. Click the subscribe button. I'm almost to 30. Very, very excited. Once I reach 50 subscribers, I might do something special. So hopefully that encourages you. And click the bell notification icon so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I will be going live again next week, probably Friday and Saturday. Not sure what time yet. I'll be streaming. We finished Lego Harry Potter yesterday, so I'll be starting a new game. I will be playing the Halo series. I'm very, very excited. And I'll be reading more Harry Potter next week as well. If you want to know what my stream schedule is going to be, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Okay, and now it's time for my 15-minute break. I will be right back. Hello, hello. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice intermission. But now it's time to get back into it. Now we're reading Chapter 8, Flight of the Fat Lady. Can't believe we're already at this point in the book. I feel like that part happens more halfway, but not that far off from halfway. I feel like we just started. Crazy. Exciting. Chapter 8, Flight of the Fat Lady. In no time at all, Defense Against the Dark Arts had become most people's favorite class. Only Draco Malfoy and his gang of Slytherins had anything bad to say about Professor Lupin. "Look at the state of his robes," Malfoy would say in a loud whisper as Professor Lupin passed. "He dresses like our old house elf." Ooh, should we remind him how he lost his house elf? That'll wipe the grin off his face. But no one else cared that Professor Lupin's robes were patched and frayed. His next few lessons were just as interesting as the first. After Boggart's, they studied redcaps, nasty little goblin-like creatures that lurked wherever there had been bloodshed, in the dungeons of castles and the potholes of deserted battlefields, waiting to bludgeon those who had gotten lost. From redcaps, they moved on to kappas, creepy water-dwellers that looked like scaly monkeys with webbed hands itching to strangle unwitting waders in their ponds. Harry only wished he was as happy with some of his other classes. Worst of all was potions. Snape was in a particularly vindictive mood these days, and no one was in any doubt why. The story of the Boggart assuming Snape's shape and the way that Neville had dressed it in his grandmother's clothes had traveled through the school like wildfire. Snape didn't seem to find it funny. His eyes flashed menacingly at the very mention of Professor Lupin's name, and he was bullying Neville worse than ever. Harry was also growing to dread the hours he spent in Professor Trelawney's stifling tower room, deciphering lopsided shapes and symbols, trying to ignore the way Professor Trelawney's enormous eyes filled with tears every time she looked at him. He couldn't like Professor Trelawney, even though she was treated... No, he couldn't like Professor Trelawney, even though she was treated with respect, bordering on reverence by many of the class. Parvati Patil and Lavender Brown had taken to haunting Professor Trelawney's tower room at lunchtimes, and always returned with annoyingly superior looks on their faces, as though they knew things that others didn't. They had also started using hushed voices whenever they spoke to Harry, as though he were on his deathbed. Nobody really liked Care of Magical Creatures, which, after the action-packed first class, had become extremely dull. Hagrid seemed to have lost his confidence. They were now spending lesson after lesson learning how to look after flubberworms, which had to be some of the most boring creatures in existence. "Why would anyone bother looking after them?" said Ron, after yet another hour of poking shredded lettuce down the flubberworms' slimy throats. At the start of October, however, Harry had something else to occupy him, something so enjoyable it more than made up for his unsatisfactory classes. The Quidditch season was approaching, and Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor team, called a meeting on Thursday evening to discuss tactics for the new season. The reason why you care for flubberworms is a lot of their material is good for potions, like, like their flesh, their saliva. Certain parts of them are really good for potions. That's why. There were 7 people on a Quidditch team, 3 chasers, whose job it was to score goals by putting the quaffle, a red soccer-sized ball, through one of the 50-foot-high hoops at each end of the field, 2 beaters who were equipped with heavy bats to repel the bludgers, 2 heavy black balls that zoomed around trying to attack the players, a keeper who defended the goalposts, and the seeker who had the hardest job of all, that of catching the golden snitch, a tiny winged walnut-sized ball, whose capture ended the game and earned the seeker's team an extra 150 points. Oliver Wood was a burly 17-year-old, now in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts. There was a quiet sort of desperation in his voice as he addressed his 6 fellow team members in the chilly locker rooms at the edge of the darkening Quidditch field. "This is our last chance, my last chance, to win the Quidditch Cup," he told them, striding up and down in front of them. "I'll be leaving at the end of this year. I'll never get another shot at it. Gryffindor hasn't won for 7 years now. Okay, so we've had the worst luck in the world. Injuries, then the tournament getting called off last year." Wood swallowed, as though the memory still brought a lump to his throat. "But we also know we've got the best ruddy team in the school," he said, punching a fist into his other hand, the old manic glint back in his eye. "We've got 3 superb chasers." Wood pointed at Alicia Spinnet, Angela Johnson, and Katie Bell. "We've got 2 unbeatable beaters." "Stop it, Oliver, you're embarrassing us," said Fred and George Weasley together, pretending to blush. "And we've got a seeker who has never failed to win us a match." "Don't say that! That's foreshadowing! Don't do that!" Wood rumbled, glaring at Harry with a kind of furious pride. "And me," he added as an afterthought. "We think you're very good too, Oliver," said George. "Spanking good keeper," said Fred. "The point is," Wood went on, resuming his pacing, "the Quidditch Cup should have had our name on it these last 2 years. Ever since Harry joined the team, I've thought the thing was in the bag. We haven't got it, and this year's the last chance we'll get to finally see our name on the thing." Wood spoke so dejectedly, and that's actually true. You don't know how true that is. Because there won't be any Quidditch next year because of the Triwizard Tournament. Order to the Phoenix, Harry gets expelled from Quidditch. Half-Blood Prince, Harry gets expelled from Quidditch again. And in Deathly Hallows, they don't even go to Hogwarts. Not as students, anyway. So, yeah, this is pretty much the last real good Quidditch we get. Where they can win, that is. It's not that they won't play Quidditch again, because they do play Quidditch a little bit in Order of the Phoenix, until Umbridge ruins the party, I believe. For Harry, at least. Like, the Gryffindors still play. It's Harry that's not allowed to play. And Fred and George, too, which is garbage. But, and then Half-Blood Prince, he plays all the way up till the last match because of what he does to Malfoy. But this is the last chance for Gryffindor to actually win the cup. Wood spoke so dejectedly that even Fred and George looked sympathetic. Actually, I want to write that down. But literally. Oliver, this year's our year, said Fred. We'll do it, Oliver, said Angelina. Definitely, said Harry. Full of determination, the team started training sessions 3 evenings a week. The weather was getting colder and wetter, the nights darker, but no amount of mud, wind, or rain could tarnish Harry's wonderful vision of finally winning the huge silver Quidditch Cup. Harry returned to the Gryffindor common room one evening after training, cold and stiff but pleased with the way practice had gone, to find the room buzzing excitedly. What's happened? He asked Ron and Hermione, who were sitting in 2 of the best chairs by the fireside and completing some star charts for astronomy. Already? I mentioned this earlier. In the first book, you'll see that upperclassmen sitting in those chairs, and the first years don't just get to sit in the chairs by the fire. But you'll see over time they eventually take over those chairs because they become the upperclassmen. You'll see in the 5th one and the 6th one that they're sitting in those chairs because they are the upperclassmen. It's just really good attention to detail in that way. First Hogsmeade weekend, said Ron, pointing at the notice that had appeared on the battered old bulletin board. End of October, Halloween. Excellent, said Fred, who had followed Harry through the portrait hole. I need to visit Zonko's. I'm nearly out of stink pellets. Harry threw himself into a chair beside Ron, his high spirits ebbing away. Hermione seemed to read his mind. Harry, I'm sure you'll be able to go next time, she said. They're bound to catch Black soon. He's been sighted once already. Black's not fool enough to try anything in Hogsmeade, said Ron. Ask McGonagall if you can go this time, Harry. The next one might not be for ages. Ron, said Hermione. Harry's supposed to stay in school. He can't be the only third year left behind, said Ron. Ask McGonagall. Go on, Harry. Yeah, I think I will, said Harry, making up his mind. Hermione opened her mouth to argue, but at that moment Crookshanks leapt lightly onto her lap. A large dead spider was dangling from its mouth. Does he have to eat that in front of us? Said Ron, scowling. Clever Crookshanks. Did you catch that all by yourself? Said Hermione. Crookshanks slowly chewed up the spider, his yellow eyes fixed insolently at Ron. Just keep him over there, that's all, said Ron irritably, turning back to his star chart. I've got Scabbers asleep in my bag. Don't say that. Crookshanks isn't actually a cat. She is a Kneasel? Is that what they're called? And they can understand you when they talk to you. She's like, oh, he's over there, is he? Well, I'm going to go get him. Harry yawned. He really wanted to go to bed, but he still had his own star chart to complete. He pulled his bag toward him, took out parchment, ink, and quill, and started work. You can copy mine if you like, said Ron, labeling his last star with a flourish and shoving the chart toward Harry. Hermione, who disapproved of copying, pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Crookshanks was still staring unblinkingly at Ron, flicking the end of his bushy tail. Then, without warning, he pounced. Oi! Ron roared, seizing his bag as Crookshanks sank 4 sets of claws deep inside it and began tearing furiously. Get off, you stupid animal! Ron tried to pull the bag away from Crookshanks, but Crookshanks clung on, spitting and slashing. Ron, don't hurt him! Squealed Hermione. The whole common room was watching. Ron whirled the bag around, Crookshanks still clinging to it, and Scabbers came flying out of the top. Catch that cat! Ron yelled as Crookshanks freed himself from the remnants of the bag, sprang over the table, and chased after the terrified Scabbers. George Weasley made a lunge for Crookshanks, but missed. Scabbers streaked through 20 pairs of legs and shot beneath an old chest of drawers. Crookshanks skidded to a halt, crouched low on his bandy legs, and started making furious swipes beneath it with his front paw. Ron and Hermione hurried over. Hermione grabbed Crookshanks around the middle and heaved him away. Ron threw himself onto his stomach and, with great difficulty, pulled Scabbers out by the tail. "Look at him," he said fiercely at Hermione, dangling Scabbers in front of her. "He's skin and bone. You keep that cat away from him." "Crookshanks doesn't understand it's wrong," said Hermione, her voice shaking. "All cats chase rats, Ron." "There's something funny about that animal," said Ron, who was trying to persuade a frantically wiggling Scabbers back into his pocket. "I heard it heard me say that Scabbers was in my bag." "Oh, what rubbish," said Hermione impatiently. "Crookshanks could smell him, Ron. How else do you think—" "That cat's got it in for Scabbers," said Ron, ignoring the people around him, who were starting to giggle. "And Scabbers was here first, and he's ill." Ron marched through the common room and out of sight, up the stairs to the boys' dormitories. Ron was still in a bad mood with Hermione next day. He barely talked to her all through herbology, even though he, Harry, and Hermione were working together on the same puffapod. "How's Scabbers?" Hermione asked timidly as they stripped fat pink pods from the plants and emptied the shining beans into a wooden pail. "He's hiding at the bottom of my bed, shaking," said Ron angrily, missing the pail and scattering beans over the greenhouse floor. "Careful, Weasley, careful," cried Professor Sprout as the beans burst into bloom before their very eyes. They had Transfiguration next. Harry, who had resolved to ask Professor McGonagall after the lesson whether he could go into Hogsmeade with the rest, joined the line outside the class, trying to decide how he was going to argue his case. He was distracted, however, by a disturbance at the front of the line. Lavender Brown seemed to be crying. Parvati had her arm around her and was explaining something to Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, who was looking very serious. "What's the matter, Lavender?" said Hermione anxiously as she, Harry, and Ron went to join the group. "She got a letter from home this morning," Parvati whispered. "It's a rabbit Binky. He's been killed by a fox." "Oh," said Hermione. "I'm sorry, Lavender." "I should have known," said Lavender tragically. "You know what day it is?" The 16th of October. That thing you're dreading. It will happen on the 16th of October. Remember? She was right. She was right." The whole class was gathered around Lavender now. Seamus shook his head seriously. Hermione hesitated. Then she said, You were dreading Binky being killed by a fox?" "Well, not necessarily by a fox," said Lavender, looking up at Hermione with streaming eyes. "But I was obviously dreading him dying, wasn't I?" "Oh," said Hermione. She paused again. Then, "Was Binky an old rabbit?" No, sobbed Lavender. He was only a baby." Parvati tightened her arm around Lavender's shoulders. "But then, why would you dread him dying?" said Hermione. She's really trying to make reason out of this. Parvati glared at her. "Well, look at it logically," said Hermione, turning to the rest of the group. "I mean, Binky didn't even die today, did he? Lavender just got the news today." Lavender wailed loudly. "And she can't have been dreading it because it came as a real shock." "Don't mind Hermione, Lavender," said Ron loudly. "She doesn't think other people's pets matter very much." Ouch. Professor McGonagall opened the classroom door at that moment, which was perhaps lucky. Hermione and Ron were looking daggers at each other, and when they got into class, they seated themselves on either side of Harry and didn't talk to each other for the whole class. Harry still hadn't decided what he was going to say to Professor McGonagall when the bell rang at the end of the lesson, but it was she who brought up the subject of Hogsmeade first. "One moment, please," she called as the class made to leave. "As you're all in my house, you should hand Hogsmeade permission forms to me before Halloween. No form, no visiting the village, so don't forget." Neville put up his hand. "Please, Professor, I think I've lost—" "Your grandmother sent yours to me directly, Longbottom," said Professor McGonagall. "She seemed to think it was safer." "Well, that's all. You may leave." "Ask her now," Ron hissed at Harry. "Oh, but—" Hermione began. "Go for it, Harry," said Ron stubbornly. Harry waited for the rest of the class to disappear, then headed nervously for Professor McGonagall's desk. "Yes, Potter?" Harry took a deep breath. "Professor, my aunt and uncle, forgot to sign my form," he said. Professor McGonagall looked over her square spectacles at him, but didn't say anything. Come on. You know what the Dursleys are like. Man. So, do you think it would be alright? I mean, will it be okay if I go to Hogsmeade? Professor McGonagall, that was a terrible way of putting it. That was terrible, Harry. That was terrible. Professor McGonagall looked down and began shuffling papers on her desk. I'm afraid not, Potter, she said. You heard what I said. No form, no visiting the village. That's the rule. But, Professor, my aunt and uncle... You know them muggles. They don't really understand about Hogwarts forms and stuff, Harry said, while Ron egged him on with vigorous nods. If you said I could go, but I don't say, said Professor McGonagall, standing up and piling her papers neatly into her drawer. The form clearly states that the parent or guardian must get permission. She turned to look at him with an odd expression on her face. Was it pity? Yes, it was. She knows. Oh, she knows. I'm sorry, Potter, but that's my final word. You had better hurry, or you'll be late for your next lesson. There was nothing to be done. Ron called Professor McGonagall a lot of names that greatly annoyed Hermione. Hermione assumed an all-for-the-best expression that made Ron even angrier, and Harry had to endure everyone in the class talking loudly and happily about what they were going to do first, once they got into Hogsmeade. There's always the feast, said Ron in an effort to cheer Harry up. You know, the Halloween feast, in the evening. Yeah, said Harry gloomily. Great. The Halloween feast was always good, but it would taste a lot better if he was coming to it after a day in Hogsmeade with everyone else. Nothing anyone said made him feel any better about being left behind. Dean Thomas, who was good at the quill, had offered to forge Uncle Vernon's signature on the form. Dang it. That would have worked, too. Maybe. I don't know. McGonagall probably would have been smarter than that. But as Harry had already told Professor McGonagall he hadn't had it signed, that was no good. Ron half-heartedly suggested the Invisibility Cloak, but Hermione stamped on that one, reminding Ron what Dumbledore had told them about the Dementors being able to see through them. Percy had what was possibly the least helpful words of comfort. They make a fuss about Hogsmeade, but I assure you, Harry, it's not all it's cracked up to be, he said seriously. All right, this sweet shop's rather good. And Zonko's joke shop frankly dangerous, and yes, the Shrieking Shack's always worth a visit. But really, Harry, apart from that, you're not missing anything. On Halloween morning, Harry awoke with the rest and went down to breakfast, feeling thoroughly depressed, though doing his best to act normally. We're bringing lots of sweets back from Honeydukes, said Hermione, looking desperately sorry for him. Yeah, loads, said Ron. He and Hermione had finally forgotten their squabble about Crookshanks in the face of Harry's difficulties. Well, that's good. Well, bye, Harry. It's probably going to suck. Don't worry about me, said Harry, in what he hoped was an offhand voice. I'll see you at the feast. Have a good time. He accompanied them to the entrance hall where Filch, the caretaker, was standing inside the front doors, checking off names along a long list, peering suspiciously into each face and making sure that no one was sneaking out who shouldn't be going. Staying here, Potter, shouted Malfoy, who was standing in line with Crabbe and Goyle. Scared of passing the Dementors? Harry ignored him and made his solitary way up the marble staircase, through the deserted corridors and back to Gryffindor Tower. Password, said the fat lady, jerking out of a doze. Petuna Major, said Harry listlessly. The portrait swung open, and he climbed through the hole into the common room. It was full of chattering first and second years, and a few older students who had obviously visited Hogsmeade so often the novelty had worn off. Oh, no. Harry! Hi, Harry! It was Colin Creevey, a second year who was deeply in awe of Harry and never missed an opportunity to speak to him. Aren't you going to Hogsmeade, Harry? Why not? Hey! Colin looked eagerly around at his friends. You can come and sit with us if you like, Harry. No thanks, Colin, said Harry, who wasn't in the mood to have a lot of people staring avidly at the scar on his forehead. I've got to go to the library. Got to get some work done. After that, he had no choice but to turn right around and head back out of the portrait hole again. What's the point waking me up? Said the fat lady, called grumpily after him as he walked away. Harry Harry wandered dispiritedly toward the library, but halfway there he changed his mind. He didn't feel like working. He turned around and came face to face with Filch, who had obviously just seen off the last of the Hogsmeade visitors. "What are you doing?" Filch snarled suspiciously. "Nothing," said Harry truthfully. "Nothing," spat Filch, his jowls quivering unpleasantly. "A likely story, sneaking around on your own. Why aren't you in Hogsmeade buying stink pellets and belch powder and whizzing worms like the rest of your nasty little friends?" Harry shrugged. "Well, get back to your common room where you belong," snapped Filch, and he stood glaring until Harry had passed out of sight. But Harry didn't go back to the common room. He climbed a staircase, thinking vaguely of visiting the Owlery to see Hedwig, and was walking along another corridor when a voice from inside one of the rooms said, "Harry?" Harry doubled back to see who had spoken, and met Professor Lupin looking around his office door. "What are you doing?" said Lupin. "That's so cool. Harry has no idea how cool Lupin is. Like, he doesn't even know yet. He doesn't even know who Lupin is yet. Man, if he knew, he would take every opportunity to go see Lupin in his free time." "What are you doing?" said Lupin, though in a very different voice from Filch. "Why are Ron and Hermione?" "Hogsmeade," said Harry in a would-be casual voice. "Ah," said Lupin. He considered Harry for a moment. "Why don't you come in? I've just taken delivery of a Grindylow for our next lesson." Oh my god. Oh! That just infuriates me. I can't even. I can't. Oh man, this part makes me so... Okay, this part doesn't make me mad. What makes me mad is the movie. The Deathly Hallows Part 1, okay? So, okay, alright. So, you know, they all get back from the whole Seven Potters fiasco. And, first of the day. Iron sharpens iron, so no other person. Yeah. Proverbs. Awesome. What was I saying? Okay, so, yes, they get to the burrow. And what people are in the habit of doing in those days, because they're dangerous, is they often stop people and before interacting with them, they ask them a personal question that only that person would know because they want to make sure they are who they appear to be, that they're not an imposter. And so, you know, Lupin out of nowhere just comes over and Dumbledore handles Harry and is like... And everybody's like, "What are you doing?" And Lupin's like, "What was the creature in my office, you know, the day you came to visit me," or whatever he said. And Harry's like, "Are you mad?" And he's like, "What creature?" And Harry's like, Grindylow. And that's correct. And in the book, yes, Lupin did ask Harry that question. Yes. That's accurate. But that didn't happen in the movie. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry has this meeting with Lupin, but it happens on the bridge. It doesn't happen in his office, and he definitely doesn't see any Grindylow in his office. So, like, it's just annoying how inconsistent Deathly Hallows is. Like, I love the Harry Potter movies. I love the Deathly Hallows movies. I do. I really, really do. But they're infuriating because... This is the one time you choose to actually do what the book says. You actually take word for word what's said in the book. And that's the one time you shouldn't do it because you didn't follow the book in the third one, but now all of a sudden you decide to follow the book in the seventh one. You need to be consistent. Because if you're not consistent, then that makes no sense. Nobody even, if you only watch the movies, you wouldn't even know what a Grindylow is. Because they don't even name them. Grindylows are the little tiny octopus-looking creatures in Goblet of Fire in the lake. They do mention they're called Grindylows. Hermione says it in a fake French accent. When she's making fun of Fleur Delacour. Sorry, I'm getting comfortable. I'm getting comfortable because I'm getting angry. I'm angry. I was like, it's just, if you're not going to follow the book, don't start following the book in the last movie. Because it just confuses people. Okay? It's not okay. It's not okay. There's so many things about that movie that I'm going to talk about when we get to Deathly Hallows. There's so many mistakes, so many poor choices they made for those movies. And I still love those movies to death. I really do. But they made some really poor choices for Deathly Hallows. Story-wise. I think cinematic-wise it looks really good, but story-wise they had some struggles, okay? Don't even get me started in talking about Dumbledore's backstory, okay? Don't even get me started. But Anyway, where am I? Okay, so this is the scene that Lupin is talking about that's not in the movie, but he talks about it in the movie. He's like, what creature did you see in my office when you came to my office, when I was a teacher in Hogwarts? A Grindylow. This is what he's talking about. A what? Said Harry. He followed Lupin into his office. In the corner stood a very large tank of water. A sickly green creature with sharp little horns had its face pressed against the glass, pulling faces and flexing its long, spindly fingers. Water demon, said Lupin, surveying the Grindylow thoughtfully. We shouldn't have much difficulty with him, not after the Kappas. The trick is to break his grip. You notice the abnormally long fingers? Strong, but very brittle. The Grindylow bared its green teeth and then buried itself in a tangle of weeds in a corner. Cup of tea, Lupin said, looking around for his kettle. I was just thinking of making one. All right, said Harry awkwardly. Lupin tapped the kettle with his wand, and a blast of steam issued suddenly from the spout. Sit down, said Lupin, taking the lid off a dusty tin. I've only got tea bags, I'm afraid, but I dare say you've had enough of tea leaves. Ah, Lupin is so cool! He's so cool. I can't even. Harry looked at him. Lupin's eyes were twinkling. How do you know about that? Harry asked. Professor McGonagall told me, said Lupin, passing Harry a chipped mug of tea. You're not worried, are you? No, said Harry. He thought for a moment of telling Lupin about the dog he'd seen in Magnolia Crescent, but decided not to. Ah! Harry, you should have said something! And I wrote it here, too. Why not? He would have known who it was! Dang it. The whole mystery could have been solved if Harry had just spoke. How many times has that happened? I didn't want Lupin to think he was a coward, especially since Lupin already seemed to think he couldn't cope with a Boggart. Something of Harry's thoughts seemed to have shown on his face, because Lupin said, Anything worrying you, Harry? No, Harry lied. He drank a bit of tea and watched the Grindylow brandishing a fist at him. Yes, he said suddenly, putting his tea down on Lupin's desk. You know that day we fought the Boggart? Yes, said Lupin slowly. Why didn't you let me fight it? Said Harry abruptly. Lupin raised his eyebrows. I would have thought that was obvious, Harry, he said, sounding surprised. Harry's not that smart. Just assume. Just assume things aren't obvious. Harry, who had expected Lupin to deny that he'd done any such thing, was taken aback. Why? He said again. Well, said Lupin, frowning slightly, I assumed that if the Boggart faced you, it would assume the shape of Lord Voldemort. He said his name. Oh my goodness! Oh my gosh, this man is so cool! Harry stared. Not only was this the last answer he expected, but Lupin had said Voldemort's name. The only person Harry had ever heard say the name aloud, apart from himself, was Professor Dumbledore. Clearly I was wrong, said Lupin, still frowning at Harry, but I didn't think it was a good idea for Lord Voldemort to materialize in the staff room. I imagined that people would panic. I didn't think of Voldemort, said Harry hoarsely. I remembered those Dementors. You thought of them at first, though. And he said that in the movie, too. That's what I'm writing. I'm writing differences from the film. I never said anything about that scene, though. I'll probably talk about it when we get to Deathly Hallows. I'll probably write it there. It's probably already written there, let's be honest. I see, said Lupin thoughtfully. Well, I'm impressed. He smiled slightly at the look of surprise in Harry's face. That suggests that what you fear most of all is fear. Very wise, Harry. I doubt he was thinking like that, but... I doubt he thought that deeply about it. Harry didn't know what to say to that, so he drank some more tea. So you've been thinking that I didn't believe you capable of fighting the Boggart, said Lupin shrewdly. Well, yeah, said Harry. He was suddenly feeling a lot happier. Professor Lupin, you know the Dementors. He was interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in, called Lupin. The door opened, and in came Snape. He was carrying a goblet, which was smoking faintly, and stopped at the sight of Harry, his black eyes narrowing. Ah, Severus, said Lupin, smiling. Thanks very much. Could you leave it here on the desk for me? Snape set down the smoking goblet, his eyes wandering between Harry and Lupin. I was just showing Harry my Grindylow, said Lupin pleasantly, pointing at the tank. Fascinating, said Snape without looking at it. You should drink that directly, Lupin. Yes, I will, said Lupin. I made an entire cauldron full, Snape continued. If you need more. I should probably take some again tomorrow. Thanks very much, Severus. Not at all, said Snape, but there was a look in his eye Harry didn't like. He backed out of the room, unsmiling and watchful. Harry looked curiously at the goblet. Lupin smiled. Professor Snape has very kindly concocted a potion for me, he said. I have never been much of a potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex. He picked up the goblet and sniffed it. Pity sugar makes it useless, he added, taking a sip and shuddering. Why? Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered the unfinished question. I've been feeling a bit off color, he said. This potion is the only thing that helps. I'm very lucky to be working alongside Professor Snape. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it. Professor Lupin took another sip, and Harry had a crazy urge to knock the goblet out of his hands. Professor Snape's very interested in the dark arts, he blurted out. Really? Said Lupin, looking only mildly interested as he took another gulp of the potion. Some people reckon... Harry hesitated, then plunged recklessly on. Some people reckoned he'd do anything to get the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. Wink wonk, wink wonk. Lupin drained the goblet and pulled a face. Disgusting, he said. Well, Harry, I'd better get back to work. I'll see you at the feast later. Right, said Harry, putting down his empty teacup. The empty goblet was still smoking. There you go, said Ron. We've got as much as we could carry. A shower of brightly colored sweets fell into Harry's lap. It was dusk, and Harry and Hermione had just turned up in the common room, pink-faced from the cold wind and looking as though they'd had the time of their lives. Well, isn't that nice for them? Thanks, said Harry, picking up a packet of tiny black pepper imps. What's Hogsmeade like? Where did you go? By the sound of it, everywhere. Dervish and Bangs, the Wizarding Equipment Shop, Zonko's Joke Shop, into the Three Broomsticks for foaming mugs of hot butterbeer, and many places besides. I've been to the Three Broomsticks, actually. Where did I have? Did I have breakfast at the Three Broomsticks? I did. I had lunch at the Leaky Cauldron, and I had breakfast at the Three Broomsticks. And it was very good. The post office, Harry. About 200 owls, all sitting on shelves, all color-coded, depending on how fast you want your letter to get there. Honeydukes has got a new kind of fudge. They were giving out free samples. There's a bit, look. We think we saw an ogre. Honestly, they get all sorts at the Three Broomsticks. Wish we could have brought you some butterbeer. Really warms you up. What did you do? Said Hermione, looking anxious. Did you get any work done? No, said Harry. Lupin made me a cup of tea in his office. And then Snape came in. He told them all about the goblet. Ron's mouth fell open. Lupin drank it? He gasped. Is he mad? Hermione checked her watch. We'd better go down, you know. The feast will be starting in 5 minutes. They hurried through the portrait hall and into the crowd, still discussing Snape. But if he... You know, Hermione dropped her voice, glancing nervously around. If he was trying to poison Lupin, he wouldn't have done it in front of Harry. Yeah, maybe, said Harry as they reached the entrance hall and crossed into the great hall. It had been decorated with hundreds and hundreds of candle-filled pumpkins, a cloud of fluttering live bats, and many flaming orange streamers, which were swimming lazily across the stormy ceiling like brilliant water snakes. See, it's weird because entrance hall is not capitalized, but great hall is. What are the rules of capitalization in that instance? I don't understand. The food was delicious. Even Hermione and Ron, who were full to bursting with honeydew sweets, managed second helpings of everything. Oh, that sounds so good right now. I am so hungry. Harry kept glancing at the staff table. Professor Lupin looked cheerful, and as well as he ever did. He was talking animatedly to tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher. Harry moved his eyes along the table to the place where Snape sat. Was he imagining it, or was Snape's eyes flickering toward Lupin more often than was natural? Yeah, but not quite for the reasons you think. The feast finished with an entertainment provided by the Hogwarts ghosts. They popped out of the walls and tables to do a bit of formation gliding. I guess that's what ghosts do. I mean, what else are they gonna do? Nearly Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, had a great success with the reenactment of his own botched beheading. It had been such a pleasant evening that Harry's good mood couldn't even be spoiled by Malfoy, who shouted through the crowd as they all left the hall, "The Dementors send their love, Potter." Yeah, that joke's already getting tired. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the Gryffindors along the usual path to Gryffindor Tower, but when they reached the corridor that ended with the portrait of the fat lady, they found it jammed with students. "Why isn't anyone going in?" said Ron curiously. Harry peered over the heads in front of him. The portrait seemed to be closed. "Let me through, please," came Percy's voice, and he came bustling importantly through the crowd. "What's the hold-up here? You can't all have forgotten the password. Excuse me, I'm head boy." In case we forgot. I'll put that. In case you forgot. And then a silence fell over the crowd, from the front first, so that a chill seemed to spread down the corridor. They heard Percy say, in a suddenly sharp voice, "Somebody get Professor Dumbledore! Quick!" People's heads turned. Those at the back were standing on tiptoe. "What's going on?" said Ginny, who had just arrived. A moment later, Professor Dumbledore was there, sweeping toward the portrait. The Gryffindors squeezed together to let him through, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to see what the trouble was. "Oh my!" Hermione grabbed Harry's arm. The fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick look at the ruined painting and turned, his eyes somber, to see Professor McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying toward him. "We need to find her," said Dumbledore. "Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once, and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the fat lady." "You'll be lucky," said a cackling voice. It was Peeves the Poltergeist, bobbing over the crowd and looking delighted, as he always did at the sight of wreckage or worry. Good alliteration. Alliteration. "What do you mean, Peeves?" said Dumbledore calmly, and Peeves's grin faded a little. He didn't dare taunt Dumbledore. Yeah, Dumbledore has already asserted dominance. Instead, he adopted an oily voice that was no better than his cackle. "Ashamed, your headship, sir. Doesn't want to be seen. She's a horrible mess. Saw her running through the landscape up on the 4th floor, sir, dodging between the trees, crying something dreadful," he said happily. "Poor thing," he added unconvincingly. "Did she say who did it?" said Dumbledore quietly. "Oh, yes, Professor Head," said Peeves with the air of one cradling a large bombshell in his arms. "He got very angry when she wouldn't let him in, you see." Peeves slipped over and grinned at Dumbledore from between his own legs. "Nasty temper he's got, that Sirius Black." Dun, dun, dun! Also, I've noticed that something special happens every Halloween. Have you noticed that? Something interesting happens every Halloween. Starting from the very first Halloween, which is when Harry's parents died. If you didn't know that, Harry's parents died in Halloween. We figured that out. We probably knew before that. But we kind of figured that out in Deathly Hallows when Voldemort kind of relives the memory and Harry sees it in his mind's eye. Him walking through the streets on Halloween, seeing kids in their masks, and one kid looks at Voldemort and they're just like, oh my god. He's like, good costume, mister. And then Voldemort looks at him and it's like, oh god, he's scary. And he runs away. But anyway, yes, they died on Halloween, if you didn't know that. And then the first Halloween, the troll is released from the dungeon. The second one, that's when the message on the wall appears. Chamber of Secrets has been opened. In here, in this one, Sirius Black first enters the castle. What happens at Halloween in Goblet of Fire? That is a really good question. Is Halloween when they have the first, is when they determine who's going to be in the Triwizard Tournament? That might be. I don't remember. Are there any other important Halloweens? I honestly couldn't tell you. I honestly can't think of any. I don't know. We'll get there. We'll see. But that is the end of the chapter. We did it. So, next week, Saturday, probably. I don't know yet. As I said, I haven't posted the schedule, but most likely next Saturday, we'll be reading Chapter 9, Grim Defeat. Oh no! And then Chapter 10, which is The Marauder's Map. Ooh, interesting. Alright. I have my own Marauder's Map, actually. Got it for Christmas one year as a teenager. That's what you see in the thumbnails. You see my Marauder's Map. Took a picture of it. But anyway, yes. So that will be it for the stream. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I certainly did. Please, if you're watching this after the fact, please continue to have the conversation in the comments. I always read the comments. Love to know what you thought of the chapters that we've read. And as always, please leave a like on the stream and subscribe. Oh, excuse me. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet, and click the notification bell so you can be notified the next time I go live and the next time I upload. Going live probably next week. I will let you know when and where and all those things. And you'll be the first to know if you follow me on Twitter. Link in the description, because I will let you know there. What the schedule is. I think that's it. So, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.